Hi everyone, welcome to the Movieception Show. My name is Fariba, and today I want to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and let's just say I have a lot of things to say about it. Before I even really get down into the movie review itself, I think it's also worth talking about how I'm going to be structuring this, review itself, because there's just a lot of things to kind of digest, to really kind of discuss about, because, this is part of a much bigger universe, a Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I think that's best to kind of just keep my review specific to how my impressions are about the movie itself, my reaction to it, how I felt about the storytelling, the performances, the characters, the action, all that sort of stuff in this review. But anything about the content itself, what the movie has specifically done in terms of its lore, the ending itself, what it could imply for the MCU future, theory speculations, I think that's better for a separate video. And that's because this video, I already expect it's going to be one of my longer ones, because there's just so much to really tackle, and I have a lot of things to really talk about, so I think this is the best course of action in terms of how I'm going to structure this video itself. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right down into my review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So yeah, going into this movie, there was a lot of questions going into Volume 3, just because there's just a lot of things going into this movie. Like, for one thing, this is going to be the conclusion. We all know that this is going to be the end of the Guardians of the Galaxy series. The actors and the cast members have been very clear about it. They've been talking about how this is going to be the conclusion of the series, the conclusion of this original team. Like, Dave Bautista and Zoe Saldana have been very clear that this is going to be their last movie as their respective characters. They're done. They don't want to do anymore. They want to move on to other things. And there's only one figurehead who has been very clear about this being the end of the Guardians series, or at least with this original team, and that is James Gunn himself. He has been writing, directing this whole series for about 10 years now. This has been his baby. This has been his passion project for that whole decade, writing and directing it. And now there's no better way to end it but with him concluding that storytelling. And of course, we all know why this is his ending, because, well, he is now the co-head of the DC Studios, trying to reboot the whole DC universe, and he's starting that off with Superhero Legacy. He has been giving updates about this. He already gave up his 10-year plan for the DC universe, and there's a lot of things that we look forward to seeing with how James Gunn is going to tackle that whole scenario with DC universe and how that's going to plan out. But even with that being the case, right, going into this movie, I definitely had a lot of things going in my mind. For one thing, can this movie perform in a way that we want it to be? Because let's be honest here, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been kind of having more duds than really successes, and especially with, Quantumania. This is a film that's following up with Quantumania that, didn't have the best performance, that has been critically panned by so many people, and it's probably one of the least favorite Marvel Cinematic movies out there, and it's not a really strong way to start off Phase 5. And not just that, but also, let's be honest here, we compared this movie to Volume 2, and there's just, a lot of things with Volume 2 had a lot of its own issues, and it's okay, how can James Gunn jump from that film? How can he improve from that? And it's is he able to succeed in that matter and somehow, give us a very satisfying conclusion to what would now be Volume 3. And not just that, but again, this is a breaking point for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If this film does not succeed in giving what the audience wants, then this is kind of it for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is a ticking time bomb for them. Where can they go if Volume 3 doesn't perform? And so it's okay, there's a lot of these question marks, a lot of this anxiety going on. Okay, how can Volume 3 perform? Can it be the saving grace of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And going to the trailers, we've seen so many trailers before, and in comparison to everything that we've seen so far in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's clear that the trailers were giving off this very darker vibe of what this film is going to be. We know this film as far more of a comedic sort of series, but with its subtle, trauma that it does kind of tackle. But this one definitely felt like it was far more darker because of the things that we were seeing with Rocket Raccoon, the fact that, it seems as if some characters may die, and that was something that was looming over a lot of people's heads, including mine. But even with that being the sense, there were some things that I was kind of a bit concerned about going into this movie. Can they, give us High Evolutionary as a impactful villain? Can he give off this essence that, he is somebody worthwhile watching? Can he be actually a big villain that we would have expected? How do we feel about Adam Warlock? Like, can he actually show off himself as a worthwhile new character in this Guardians film, even though it's going to be the end of the series itself? And not just that, but how can the story itself be able to conclude the whole series, and will it do so in a way that's very fulfilling? There was a lot of things going into it. Like, I mean, as I said before, there was a lot of things that I was just kind of like, can this movie actually work out by the end? Having said the things that I had with the concerns, the questions, the skepticisms, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is without a doubt a roller coaster ride that you want to jump in more and more, and it does so in a way that you are really satisfied by the end of it. I mean, this is a film that, I mean, it's truly like no other. I think I have to applaud James Gunn for this, but with this film, it had just about everything. It had the comedy, it had the humor, it had the immense action, the darkness, the heartbreak. It had everything. This is a film that I did not expect would really exceed my expectations going into it, having said all the things I just said before. And this is a very good thing. This is a very good thing that this is how this film has performed, has given us as its final product. And now let's look at James Gunn himself, right? Like, he has a really particular way of doing his storytelling. Like, when we look at the Guardian series itself, like, it does tend more into the comedic area comparison to some of the other things that we see in the Marvel universe. Like, I mean, let's be honest, it is a very funny, series, because the characters are typically very funny. But also, not just that, but even with all the humorous aspects, there's definitely something a bit more complex with the things that we do see. There's definitely this trauma, this tragic element it does have here and there. We saw this with Volume 1, we see this with Volume 2, and this continues on with Volume 3, but in a way that exceeds its own levels. And it's done so in a way that is, really structured very satisfyingly, and, giving us a really immense, very impactful story that really gushes you in the heart. And I think I have to really applaud with how James Gunn really just structures everything, really just sets up the story, and really getting the impactful, emotional feel out of it. And I think there's no way of just describing but that. And let me just start us off with kind of how, James Gunn fixes a lot of the character development in this film, and how he really positions everyone in their own spotlight. Like, for one thing, one of the issues I had with Volume 2 is that even though that film was very, it makes sense why that film was very centered on Peter Quill, because they were really incorporating the Eagle storyline. Like, of course, he's going to be one of the big aspects for this film. He's going to be leading it. He's going to have the most screen time for it. But with all the subplots that we do have, like, again, there was a whole situation with Gamora and Nebula that he does tackle, and that kind of gets resolved a little bit. But with some of the other characters, like, they don't get the chance to really shine. Like, for one thing, Drax and Mantis, they kind of were put back in the back seat for just comic relief, but also kind of maybe a few times discussing more of the more subtle undertones of, like, exploring their stories, but not having such a significance in a way that I would have wanted it to be. Like, with Drax, like, he was kind of the comic relief in that film. And even though they do have that one scene where he does open up to Mantis, it wasn't really enough. Like, we know from Volume 1 that he, even though he might not be the smartest person in the team, he might be a bit tone deaf with a lot of things that that do happen. He's a very tragic character. He is somebody who has been through so much. He lost his family because of Thanos, and this is something that James Gunn himself has really tackled in terms of setting the foundation of his story. But since then, it hasn't really been ever resolved or ever been discussed later on in some of the other films, because he's kind of been put in the back seat as for that reason. But when we do get into Volume 3, this becomes all fixed. Like, everything becomes far more structured with setting up his character development. It felt like we're going into his story in this film, and I'm just using him as an example. We'll talk about some of the others, but going into Drax, like, he definitely felt like he had a much more bigger presence. Like, he felt like he actually had a story to tell. And I think that was something that I really appreciated that, James Gunn was really doing, which makes sense because this film is going to be the ending for this whole team. Like, they have to make sure, or he has to make sure that, he needs to somehow conclude everyone's story arc in a way that, is very fitting to the eventual finale. And it's with Drax, like, they really tackle a lot of things that were set up from Volume 1, like who this character is, why he's like this, why, despite some of the opinions from some people who may say that he might be a bit on the dumb side, he does have his redeeming factors. And this becomes a big part in this movie. They really redeem him in a very big way. And I think that's something that really put a smile in my face. Like, for once, we're actually seeing some side characters finally getting their time to shine. And it's not just Drax. Like, he was just an example I wanted to say, but it's not just Drax. Like, this is a case for every character in this movie who has been a part of the team. Nebula got her chance to really just shine. Like, we've seen her as, when she started, she was a secondary antagonist in Volume 1. Like, she was somebody who really wanted to just get her father's approval for everything because her childhood is very tragic. She's basically been pulled apart into pieces as a machine and never looked at as a person. And then, of course, after Volume 2, we really start to see a change in heart with Nebula and seeing how much she has changed since. And now we see her in Volume 3 really become a really big presence in Nowhere, where she's now becoming not just a big leader, but somebody who really wants to make a change as a big part of society. And again, not just her, like, we also see this Mantis. Like, Mantis is somebody who has definitely been a wild card going into the Guardian series because she just came in as kind of this new kid in Volume 2. Like, she didn't really get the chance to kind of give her side of the story. Although she is somebody who understands kind of the emotions and understanding when someone who actually can read people's feelings. And that's something that's a big thing about going into this movie. And I think that with the holiday special, it definitely gave her that boost of like who this character is. I feel like Mantis, again, didn't really get her chance to really shine until the holiday special, where we got to really understand who Mantis is as a character. And this gets further expanded into Volume 3, really understanding who this character is, really understanding what Mantis feels, because we never got to see where Mantis feels, and now we do see it here, and how that plays a big part of her trying to kind of explore who she is, and kind of setting up again her resolution and the end of the film. And it doesn't stop there. Like, we also see, so Peter does have his time to also kind of his moment to really kind of be up there. They do give us a subtle, implications of where his story might be going, some hints here and there. But of course, a big aspect is his way of coping with Gamora's death, but also trying to handle the fact that Gamora is technically back, but it's not the same Gamora that he knew. There was that whole thing to really tackle, but also him dealing with everything else that's happening in the movie and his team. Again, like, that was really well handled, and doing it in a way that that everybody still has their chance to shine without making, Peter Quill the big star. Like, no one ever felt like they were overshadowed because of Peter Quill. Like, Peter Quill even had his own time to kind of shine in his moments without overtaking everyone else. And I think, again, the big one, I think a lot of people were just wondering where can this really go, is Gamora's story, because Gamora in this movie is not the same Gamora, as I mentioned before. This is a different Gamora. She's not that Gamora that fell in love with Peter Quill. This is a Gamora that, was in 2014. Somehow ended up in a different universe in 2023, or I think in this case, at this point, we're now in 2025-ish. But now she needs to find her own route and where her fate is going to be. Like, where can she be? And yeah, the way that James Gunn tackles her character as well, like, it's very well done. We can see where, there's much more tough Gamora, how she grows, how she shines, and doing so in a way that, again, is done in a very, satisfying manner without going too deep into some complexities of how, or in a case, doing so in a way that's any forceful of where her character should be, but doing so in a way that, again, that seems far more natural, far more fitting to what has been set up so far going into Volume 3. And that's just the big thing I want to say. Like, every character had their time to really shine. But let me just say this. The heart and soul of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is without a doubt Rocket Raccoon. Like, going into this film, it's really insane how much this reception has been towards Rocket Raccoon, because honestly speaking, like, if you were to ask any of us like 10 years ago, like, to rank up all the Guardians members, like, Rocket Raccoon would have been more so in the middle. Like, he wasn't somebody who we would say is the best Guardian. But each and every time we start to see Rocket, each and every time that we get to see a bit more of who Rocket is, seeing him as somebody who's a closed book, someone who doesn't want to talk about his past, but who definitely does have something, deep inside of him that he's been really trying to, explode for some days now. And not just that, but seeing him have a, pretty good impact in Endgame. Like, honestly speaking, like, he started to become somebody who not only was becoming a big character in the Guardians team, but somebody who also started to become a fan favorite Guardian going into this movie. Like, for me, I was honestly very concerned about going for Rocket Raccoon. Like, I was just like, wow, this guy is actually becoming my favorite Guardians character in a big, big way. Like, like, he's just a raccoon being voiced by Bradley Cooper, and here it is, like, he happens to be one of the most important characters going to Volume 3, and now everyone's just really concerned about him. Like, is he going to live? Is he going to survive? We don't know. Now, and even with that being said, Volume 3 makes it clear that this film is going to be very focused on Rocket Raccoon. He is now the star of this. He is the one who's going to set up the rest of this movie. Everything else that's happening is centered upon him. And it's done so in a way that I would have never imagined. And it definitely got me in the deep feels of like, wow, this is a film that we're getting. Like, his side of the story was definitely was the highlight. It was a standout out of everything else that was going on. Like, every time that we get into Rocket Raccoon's story, every time we go into the flashback scenes with his past, like, I felt so engaged by it. Like, I've never felt so deep and so connected to a character like Rocket Raccoon than ever before. And oh my god, like, once you get to each and every part of his story, like, there was just no way. It really keeps you speechless. Like, there's just no other way to describe it, but it's just wow. Like, the way that James Gunn sets up Rocket's story here, I mean, it's masterful. It's a masterpiece. Like, there's just no other way to say it. Like, I honestly would say this, like, I wouldn't have minded if we had a separate Rocket Raccoon film just focused on his backstory, his past, his origin story, how he became this Rocket Raccoon who's intelligent, who can't talk, who is a talking raccoon. And here it is, we finally get it. And it's like, honestly speaking, like, I would have not minded if it was its own film, because everything about it was just so engaging. Everything about it was so tragic. Everything about it was so interesting that there wasn't a moment that I was looking any other direction. I was really just stuck onto the screen watching this character. Every time you ended up showing up on the big screen, I was just like, yes, I want to see Rocket Raccoon. His story is one I cannot wait to see. Let me just say, like, once we do get to kind of the big moments of his story, like, holy crap, did my heart just shatter. Like, it just shattered into pieces. The amount of emotional depth that you get into his story is just remarkable. Like, I cannot, like, it's literally just chef's kiss from James Gunn. Like, I cannot just say how much I enjoyed watching Rocket Raccoon's story, because that was literally the highlight. That was the best part about the movie. It's because of this film that this film is able to really center itself around allowing other things to work out. And without this element, this movie wouldn't have worked. The fact that, you know, James Gunn made this bold move of having a film so centered on Rocket Raccoon, I mean, just wow. Hands up. I mean, I'm just applauding James Gunn for making this decision. It's a very bold one for sure, and it worked out big time. Like, again, I cannot express how heartbreaking, how traumatic, how tragic his story is. It's probably I would actually rank it as one of the best, you know, not just backstories, but origin stories in the MCU. The way that we really see the emotional aspect of Rocket Raccoon just seem really explode onto the big screen. Like, I mean, it's bravo. Like, I've never seen this happen before. This is a new level for the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a big, big way. Let me just say this, right? I think the last time I cried watching a Marvel movie or Marvel Cinematic movie was probably back in Endgame. That was just about roughly 4 years ago. That was the last time I had cried. Going into this movie and watching those scenes with Rocket Raccoon, the flashback scenes, the scenes with him, Lila, Teefs, and Floor, like, holy crap. Like, I've had moments where I probably have a couple tears, like, dripping from my face, but this is a moment where I was brawling. Like, my biggest regret was not bringing Kleenex tissues with me, because holy crap, I was brawling. I was literally having such a really big shattering moment. I was, like, traumatized watching everything from that film, and I was just like crying and crying. I mean, I had to use my jacket just to wipe my tears, just because of how much I was emotionally impacted by the moments that we saw with Rocket Raccoon. Just like, wow, like, I've never seen the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever like this. Like, and it's not just once, I cried twice. Like, and you'll probably know which two scenes I'm talking about and which two scenes made me cry. And even with the more traumatic elements, even with the more tragic stuff that we do see, like the heartbreak, everything about it, right? With all that deep emotional impact that we do get from this film, it doesn't take away the fact that, again, this film, this whole series has been, you know, set upon as being a lot more comedic. Like, even with volume 3, like with all the even with all the heartbreak that we do deal with, there is still a sense where, you know, everything else is still balanced out. The action is balanced out. The humor and the tone of it is all balanced out. We do get some humorous moments that do fit in very well without overpowering some of the other things that we've seen before. Like, I mean, this is an issue that I've had with Iron Man 3, where, yeah, it's supposed to be a serious movie, but because of the comedic aspects, it totally destroyed the whole tone of it. But we don't get that issue here in Volume 3. It's done in a way that everything else is so balanced out without making any part of the tone feel so overwhelming, so, you know, out of balance, that, again, you have to applaud James Gunn for really just, like, you can tell the love that he puts into the writing for this and making sure that everything fits really well into it without having all these issues. And again, the way that he sets up and structures this film, it works out so perfectly well. Like, again, I'm applauding James Gunn for really just ending off the series in a very satisfying note. Now, the core of this film, of course, is Rocket Raccoon. He is the main star of it. He's the one who's setting up not just the flashback scenes, but the, you know, the present day where the Guardians are trying to save him. None of this would work without that whole aspect with Rocket Raccoon. Like, if it wasn't done in the way that it's supposed to be, then I don't think this film would have worked at all. But let's be honest here, like, with this film, even, like, I think the big part of it is the villain. Like this film wouldn't have been as emotionally deep if it wasn't for the villain himself. And let's be honest here, like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has had their issues with villains. Like, this has been a big talking point, like, for a while now. Like, anytime that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has a villain, they typically end up becoming forgettable, although there have definitely been some villains that have really stuck out as being some of the best, like Thanos, Loki, and Green Goblin, all that sort of, you know, characters right there. But when we look at specifically the Guardian series, there's definitely been a lot more problems in that area. Like, for one thing, with Volume 1, Ronan was a villain there, and again, he was just kind of there setting up a lot of things, but didn't really have much of an impact as a villain. Like, he was somebody who you could easily destroy, and that was the case there. And he's still, like, one of the most low tier villains out there. And then when we look at Volume 2 with Ego, like, he was definitely a bit of an improvement from Ronan, but because he did have some things going on, he did have some, you know, devious things out there, but even then, like, his impact didn't have much of, you know, a huge thing going on. Like, again, he would just probably he's still kind of rank as a bit on the below average of a villain, but nothing too big. Like, again, he'll just be an afterthought, really. But High Evolutionary, let me just say this, right? Like, we've had these villains where, you know, they can be a bit more complex. They can have a bit of this grayness with them, like Loki. And, I mean, sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. But here with the High Evolutionary, he is pure villain. He is somebody who clearly has his own agenda. He has his own, you know, goals in sight. He knows what he wants to do. He's very ambitious. He's very bold. And he wants what he wants. And going into this film and really just dissecting who High Evolutionary is, let me just say this. I hated his guts. He made me very annoyed. He made me angry. And he really made me anxious. But having said that, that's a good thing. I'm really saying this. That's a good thing that I was expressing those emotions, because honestly speaking, like, High Evolutionary in this film, he was very devious. He's very evil. He's very menacing. Like, you get that sense of this character. Like, yeah, when you start this character off, we get to understand who he is. We know who his motives are, what he wants to do. He wants to act like God. He wants to experiment on things and wants to, you know, have the best of the best quality of outcomes with his, you know, play toys that he considers. And honestly speaking, like, every time you get to learn more about who this High Evolutionary guy is, holy crap, you just hate his guts. You clearly hate his guts. There's nothing redeeming about him. And that's a good thing, because holy crap, like, anytime he ends up, you know, present on the screen, I was having a lot of anxiety seeing this character. I was just like, oh my god, if he touches one thing, I'm going to, like, flip. Like, that's how much I was feeling about this villain, which is, again, it's a very good thing to be expressing this emotion. Like, anytime you have this villain, like, you're supposed to be feeling this way. This is how you should be feeling going into the movie. Like, is this villain going to make you scared? And that was something I was feeling with the High Evolutionary, that he was somebody who was really scaring me. Like, he could do anything, and he was doing some very, very menacing, mellifluous stuff. Like, it was oh my god, I can't even tell you how incredibly well done that James Gunn sets up this high evolutionary character as the villain. Like, he was very villainous. He was definitely, like, I would say when you like compare him in terms of the other MCU villains that we've had before, like, I wouldn't say he is top 3 for sure. Like, I think that's still reserved for characters like Green Goblin, Loki, Thanos, and even some other characters right there as well. But I would say he might be in the top 10 for sure, because he was menacing. He was something that was really giving you anxiety, who was really frustrating you, but also in a sense that is done in a way that you are feeling those reactions. And again, like, this was what I really want to see with Kang too, or Kong, because like, this is what I should have felt with Kong. Like, that's what's really frustrating, is that this is how I should have felt. Like, the ways I was feeling about High Evolutionary is what I should have felt with Kong, because Kong is this big bad that has been, hyped for some time now. And when we were going to Quantumania, I was hoping that we would get the sense of this menacing feel about him, this reaction that, oh my god, this guy is truly scary. Like, I don't know how I feel about it. Like, the next, like, honestly speaking, like, if he was to touch anything else, anytime he shows on the big screen, I should feel this anxiety building up and my blood just kind of pressuring up in a way that, you're getting this strong reaction to it. And that's not something I got the sense with Kang. But in this one, like with High Evolutionary, that was how I was feeling. Like, it truly felt like he was somebody that, anytime he showed up on the big screen, you felt really scared. And that was something that I have to applaud, that James Gunn was able to really develop this character in a way that he was able to exude this sort of reaction towards the audience. And honestly to God, like, let me just say this. I feel like a lot of people don't understand what he has done in this movie, because, yeah, we are focusing on the Rocket Raccoon aspects, and yeah, he is a truly awful person. Like, there's nothing to really redeem him. That's very clear. But let me just say there's like one thing that happens in the movie that I feel like a lot of people don't realize he has done, but it is very, very devilish, very, very evil. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. I'm just kind of like looking around, like, we do realize what's going on, right? Like, this guy is truly pure evil. I will say, for one thing, like, we got the sense of who he is, like, in his motivational aspects, but I was kind of like, okay, that's his motivational stuff, but like, how can he really do physically? And then I was like, okay, he might not be that much of a scary villain. And then of course something happens at the end of the film that I was just kind of like, oh shit. Yeah, he is somebody who I'm now very, very scared of. And yeah, you'll probably figure out which scene I'm talking about if you guys seen the movie. Like, yeah, like High Evolutionary was really a high bar. Like, this is the best Guardians villain that we have seen in the Guardians of the Galaxy series. And I mean, again, a very top tier Marvel villain that we've seen overall. And I think I had to really not just applaud with how James Gunn has written this character and his impact on the big screen, but you also have to give props to the actor. And I'm gonna butcher this, but I'll try my best to say his name. But I think his name is pronounced as Chukwudi Iwuji. You have to really applaud him. The performance that he puts into this character, like, you can get the sense of like this like a range of versatility of this character. Like, in one scene you can see how happy he is to see his creations like working out and giving this sense of promise, this false promise, but also being very manipulative and cunning about it. And then when we do start to see more of who he really is, he's nothing more than a cunning, devious, very self-centered, conceited person who only cares about his purpose and what he can contribute to the universe. Like, you really have to give props to his performance, because again, it wouldn't, like, even though you have the writing of James Gunn's villainous story right here, it still wouldn't work without the actual actor really just giving that oomph of that villain, and he really just makes him stand out. And holy crap, like, again, like, the villain, like, again, this is the villain that we should have gotten with Kang, and we didn't, but at least we got it with Volume 3, which is all that matters. Yeah, like, honestly speaking, like, this film, like, James Gunn really nails it. Like, he really made sure that he put the heart and soul into this movie. I think one reason why this film may have done so well is because it is kind of 6 years in between Volume 2 and Volume 3. That probably gave him a bit more time to really just fix a lot of the issues of Volume 2, and even from Volume 1, right? Like, there was an issue with the villain thing in Volume 1, but fixing all those issues from those two stories and making sure that he really gives us this quality film that does in a way that it's supposed to be a crowd-pleasing experience and a satisfactory conclusion to the Guardian series. Like, again, you get that sense coming from James Gunn. Again, you have to applaud him for really putting that passion, that love and devotion to the story that he had started 10 years ago. And we see that here very clearly with Volume 3. I'm talking about the fact that he fixed the villain problems, the fact that we got to see every character have their time to shine, especially Rocket Raccoon. Like, I have to applaud Bradley Cooper. Like, again, there's that one scene, which, again, I'm pretty sure a lot of people know which scene I'm talking about, but there's this one scene that I really have to applaud Bradley Cooper for this, because, I mean, let me just say this, like, when it comes to voice acting, they don't get a lot of credit for just the fact that voice acting can be a bit difficult. Like, you really have to put a lot of emotion to it, even though you're not playing it. And though Sean Gunn was doing the motion caption for Rocket Raccoon, Bradley Cooper is the voice actor for it. And there's that one scene in the film where it really crushes you, like, emotionally. And just to hear this moment and just the emotions that you get, like the way that Rocket Raccoon reacts in that one scene, again, the amount of power coming from Bradley Cooper's performance in that one scene, like, bravo to that. Like, it's because of moments like these where I am crying, where I am feeling a lot of this emotion, where I'm going through this roller coaster ride. Again, like, plots to the performances from the actors, from James Gunn, from with his writing, his directing, the storytelling, the fact that we finally got to see this very satisfying way of how the characters interacting, how their story goes, how their arcs are really moving forward. Again, this movie does such a great job of giving everybody just a chance to shine. And again, that's why I feel like I came out of that theater feeling so happy, because for once, I was actually watching a very quality Marvel Cinematic movie, and in a way that, again, I can actually remember some of the like, it's finally as if we're getting to the glory moments of the MCU again, especially after that bomb fest that was Quantumania. About the action, because, like, the action in this film is also pretty spectacular. Because let me just talk about the hallway scene, because the hallway scene was just wow. Like, I was just kind of like having just a blast watching that hallway scene. Like, it was kind of like this continuous shot of everybody fighting in that whole scene. Like, I mean, yeah, let's be honest here, like, when it comes to the MCU, there's definitely this thing about hallway scenes. Like, I mean, although, like, Daredevil was pre-MCU, but even then, like, hallway scenes, big thing, everyone loves it. And that one was just really incredible to see, just all of them working together in that one moment. Like, wow, that was some pure high quality action right there. Like, that was great to watch. And there was also some really good, awesome action scenes early on. Like, there's a lot of great action in between, but of course that was the one that was like the biggest highlight right there. Like, again, what a really great way of just setting up the visuals, the cinematography of those moments. Just like, wow, like, I was having a blast watching this movie. Yeah, it's pretty clear that Volume 3 is way better than Volume 2. Like, there's no debating about it. Like, I've mentioned before, I had so many issues with Volume 2 with the villain, the characters, the storytelling. There was just a lot of inconsistency with that whole film. Like, there's just, I mean, that's kind of just the bottom of it all. I think, yeah, I mean, if I were to rank it, it would be like Volume 2, then Holiday Special, and then, of course, there's that question of whether or not Volume 1 or Volume 3 is better. Having been highly praising Volume 3 for kind of just being the redeeming factor for the MCU, I do want to say that Volume 1 is still the best Guardians film for a reason. Like, even though Volume 3 has fixed a lot of things that have been an issue in both 1 and Volume 2, let me just say this, right? Like, there are still some things that are, you know, noticeable problems in Volume 3 that are both either forgivable or unforgivable. Like, there's aspects to it. Like, for one thing, like, the one thing that I really noticed was kind of like a big thing that was kind of bothered me was just how, you know, quickly the exposition was. Like, going into the movie, yeah, we got the sense of, like, this is going to be very focused on Rocket Raccoon, but a lot of things went by very fast in the first, like, 20 minutes of this movie without giving us a chance to really dissect or really digest a lot of things that are going on. It goes by so quickly that it's just like, okay, I need kind of a breather a little bit, just because a lot of things were happening. But I will say this, it is forgiven the fact that it does recalibrate its pacing by, you know, trying to slow down a little bit going into the second act. Like, okay, we now saw this as an exposition. We now see this kind of being the overarching big moment that's going to basically affect the rest of this movie. So let's recalibrate that pacing and make sure that we kind of slow down a little bit and make sure that the center of the story, the center of the characters start to really flourish each and every moment. And that at least was something I was able to forgive, because once it does recalibrate its pacing, it does start to really become a much better movie, where again, you're seeing a lot of the character development, you're seeing a lot of the character arcs kind of really moving forward, evolving, expanding, as well as a lot of the other things that are happening in between, that again, you're really kind of enjoying that experience as a high quality film. I do have to stress that again, like the exposition, the whole first act of the film goes by very quickly. Like when I was in the theater, I actually had one friend who was a bit late going into the theater and missed like about a good 5 minutes of the movie because she was still kind of picking up popcorn and all that sort of stuff. So I was with another friend as well who had actually, made it in time watching the movie. And by the time the movie did end, I was trying to explain to my friend what happened in the, first 5 minutes. My other friend was like, I can't even remember what happened those first 5 minutes because it went by so quickly. Like, that's how forgettable the first act is, because it went by so quickly. So again, I'm at least happy though that they do recalibrate that pacing just to make sure that, okay, this wasn't the feeling for the rest of the movie. And let's be honest here, this is a very long movie. This is actually one of the longer MC movies that we've had, in its own entirety, because this movie is about, I think, 2 hours and 30 minutes. So there's a lot of things that are happening. And even then, like, even though the pacing did get a bit problematic in the beginning of the film and it does recalibrate itself and slows down a little bit, it never felt as if the movie was ever too long or too short. After kind of fixing itself a little bit, it felt like I wanted to see more of this movie because of how genuinely impressive that storytelling was. Like, that really, because the story itself was very, very well done, very engaging. And if it wasn't for that, like, I mean, again, this film would have been a far different movie, a far different experience overall. But I'm just happy again, like, we do get this really amazing film where even with the whole pacing issue in the beginning, it does kind of fix itself later on and giving us this really, truly impactful, emotional story, this whole characters and all that sort of stuff, leading up to, again, this very satisfying conclusion that we would get with, again, handling everything what would eventually be the end of this whole era with the Guardians. So that was just one thing I did forgive a little bit, with just a little bit of the pacing issue. The one I cannot forgive, and I thought was a big issue through and through and became very noticeable, is Adam Warlock. Like, there has been such a huge hype with Adam Warlock as a character. Like, I was really looking forward to seeing Will Poulter as Adam Warlock, because I thought that going into this movie that we're going to see this really big presence of Adam and how he would become a big part of the MCU. But honestly speaking, like, he just wasn't really doing much in this movie. Like, he was just kind of there. Like, yeah, he was kind of an issue and kind of an obstacle for the Guardians here and there, but honestly speaking, he was just kind of there for, again, what would be eventually be the comedic relief. They really dumb him down a lot, and he doesn't really play a big part as we get more and more into the conclusion of the movie. Like, I mean, there's one part that does happen in the finale or in the end where it's like, okay, well, now we can understand why Adam, is in the film, but honestly speaking, he was very wasted. Like, that was the issue that I had. He just felt wasteful. Like, there wasn't anything too interesting about Adam Warlock, which is a really big disappointment, because I had so many expectations with that character because there was just so much hype behind it, and it just ended up becoming a bit underwhelming at the end. So that was like the one thing that I wish could have been improved, I wish could have done differently, just because like there was just so much going on with Adam Warlock. There was just so much hype behind it, and it just didn't, reach my expectations for it. But yeah, that was like the one thing I wish could have been handled properly. But even with that being the case, like, overall, this film does such a great job of really just setting up this whole story right here, making sure that every characters do shine, especially with the main team, because the main team is who we needed to focus on, because again, we knew that this was going to be the end of the road for this original team, or at least with this lineup of the team going into it, because again, we knew that this was going to be the end of the Guardian series. And with the ending itself, like, it is done in a way that is very fulfilling, that's very satisfying, without making it seem too forceful. Like, everything's felt really natural and it made a lot of sense as to why some of the characters made their decisions. And so yeah, with that ending and what was, again, eventually kind of conclusion of the series, it made sense why these characters were going in those directions. And it helped knowing that, with all that character development, all that arc that we did see early on, it made sense. It made it very accepting to see why these characters are going in this direction. So there's at least one thing that I was very happy about. It's like, because sometimes a lot of people or a lot of directors or a lot of writers can sometimes mess up that ending, because the ending is really big. How can you conclude that, set up that conclusion right here, making sure that it can still be very significant. And I think James Gunn does it in a way that is very, I think really works out with what it should be, and doing so in a way that, it still opens up a lot of other things for some characters, but also allowing this to also be the conclusion for other characters because of what we have heard from some of the cast members. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. Like, I will say this, like, the MCU was definitely in this really big breaking point where if this movie were to have been a dud, like, this would have been it. This would have been the end of the MCU as we know it, because honestly speaking, like, the MCU was definitely in this very bad situation before going into Volume 3 because of what happened with Quantumania, because of the fact that there has been some criticism with how the quality of movies have been throughout the multiverse saga or after, Endgame. We've had some hits like Shang-Chi and No Way Home. And I think the last quality film that I felt like I really was, happy with was No Way Home, because, I wasn't a big fan of Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. I felt like there was a lot of things, it had a lot of, moments, it had these elements, but it just didn't come together as great as it should have been. Thor: Love and Thunder was just a huge disappointment for me, just because it was just, handled very generically and there wasn't anything too impactful about it. I think with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, it was definitely an improvement, but it wasn't still like, I was like very satisfied. Like, I didn't have that very satisfactory feeling about it. I just felt like, okay, I wish I would have gotten more. And of course, Quantumania was just a huge disappointment, like something that I wish could have been handled differently. And it's just like, wow, like, if this is the direction of the MCU, I'm very concerned. Like, this was where I was feeling very, very concerned about the MCU. So again, going into Volume 3, I would say this, like, it really has redeemed the MCU. Like, I feel like it's actually has saved it from becoming a big, bomb fest, basically, because let's be honest, like, if this film didn't do well, if this film didn't get that reaction that a lot of us are feeling, like, I don't know where the MCU would be right now moving forward. And I think that this film, like, James Gunn has really just saved the MCU just making this movie, and doing so again, making sure that he properly concludes everything that he was hoping it to be, putting the love and passion into these characters, putting the love and passion for the story. And that's very clearly seen with the quality that we get, the outcome, the product that we see. And again, I'm just happy that I came out of that theater just feeling happy, knowing that, okay, for once, I actually enjoyed an MCU movie in such a long time. So yeah, that's a really good feeling about it. Right? Like, I mean, this is a team that has always been, about saving the world. But I think one of the things I really enjoyed about this whole franchise is that it's not just about them trying to save the world, but also seeing their personal journey, their relationship, their dynamic together. And I really thoroughly enjoyed that whole storytelling coming from James Gunn. Like, we really see how much this whole team has become a family. And again, we see that again being thoroughly being depicted in this Volume 3 film. And again, just to see this satisfying way of concluding everything, you have to give props for James Gunn putting all that effort, putting all that love into this whole franchise, which again, I mean, it's going to be sad to see James Gunn no longer being a part of or being involved with the MCU, but that at least gives me a lot of positivity going into the DCU and seeing where that whole universe is going to be, because if he can do that with the Guardians series, that, back then was considered the laughingstock, and then, really just silencing all its naysayers, I can't wait to see what he's going to do with the DCU. So that's a really promising note right there. And yeah, I mean, that kind of sums about how I feel about Volume 3. I think it definitely ranks as some of the best multiverse saga movies that we did get this, throughout this whole journey so far, alongside Shang-Chi and No Way Home. I think, again, it definitely ranks as one of the better films for sure. Again, quite the experience I've never thought I would ever have to deal with, but also, like, definitely getting those strong emotions definitely felt like a good sign that this is a very good movie. Like, again, I hope to see it again sometime soon, just because it is a very good movie. Definitely a very emotional journey that we've gone through, not just with this film, but also for the last 10 years that we followed the Guardians. So yeah, we'll see where those characters go for those who are still sticking around, because there are some things that do happen in the post-credit scene. But yeah, I mean, having said that, like, again, I thoroughly enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It definitely is gonna be one of my favorite movies this year so far. I mean, again, I wish I had tissues with me, but with that being said, like, I can't wait to see where the MCU is going to go moving forward. And I hope that we can only see the MCU just keeping on improving more and more after this, because, like, I think it really needs it right now. And right now, this movie really has set the bar for it. I think that basically sums about how I feel about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I mean, without a doubt, if Rocket Raccoon had been my favorite character at this point, he's definitely is now. I really enjoyed the storytelling, really enjoyed everything that we got out of this film. The performances were there, the humor was there, the action was spectacular, the heartbreak was definitely right there, the emotional deep depth. Again, this film had everything about it. I think, again, like, this has definitely redeemed the MCU, and I can't wait to see what else we're going to see about it. Like, again, I've never felt as if I'm so happy to see this direction of the MCU once again. So let me know what your thoughts are. Have you seen the movie? Have you not seen it? If you have not seen it, you need to go to theaters right now because you're missing out on quite the experience, because wow, this movie is spectacular. If you have, what are your thoughts about it? Like, what do you think about the storytelling itself? Like, the fact that it's very focused on Rocky Raccoon, how do you think about those flashback scenes? Did you get the same emotional resonance that I felt, or maybe you kind of felt differently? What do you think about the other aspect of the movie, some of the other plots about it, such as them trying to save him, or some of the other things like the villain? How do you think about the villain? What are your opinions about Evoluntionary? How do you think about Adam Warlock? What are thoughts about the conclusion itself? Like, do you like it? Did you not like it? And let me know if you have any other thoughts about the movie itself, as well as any questions about the content below, so I can answer them in a different video. Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe.